Okay, good afternoon all, and welcome and thanks for being here. We'll go ahead and call it to order. My understanding is that there is the confirmation of posting was done. Josh, that was correct, is correct? Posting of the agenda and all the packet and all that. And then, so looking down, I see that everybody is here and we have a new committee member. And do I understand you go by Andy?
Yes.
So is it Anderson? Is it Anderson? Okay. So welcome and thank you for being part of us. And I guess we'll start the public comment period. So the first, if anybody, to Josh, does anybody email or anything? Okay. So I guess we'll go and put it on the phone number up. So if anybody's interested, and the number is 702-589-9629. And remember that this is just, at this time, it's only related to the comments only related to the agenda items. Again, that number is 702-589-9629. Okay, not hearing any comments, and we didn't receive any comments. We'll look at the agenda, and is there anything that the city have a preference that they'd like to put anything beforehand for the convenience of the city?
No, I think everything's in order.
Okay. Okay, so I guess we will look at, for possible action, approval of the December 1st, 2021 Utility Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Did anybody have any comments? Okay, I had one. Let's see. Just to help clarify things, because I saw it might be confusing. So Josh, on page 15, that is, I think that was item. Let's see, what was it? It was item 6, I believe it was. It was related to the future agenda items. But page 15, fourth paragraph or statement. The last line, first to the last line, it says council. I asked if that was okay with council, and then the next line says the committee agrees. So that's what a positive it was. I didn't go back to the video, but I'm sure it was. I asked the committee if that statement I had made earlier was correct. Okay. So we can just change the council to committee. Then I'm okay with the rest of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Okay,
Move to approve. Second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That's it.
Just to clarify, the motion is to approve with the change that you made, Mr. Kerr?
Thank you. Okay. So do you want us to revote to be on the safe side? I guess it wouldn't hurt. So would you mind, Ned, so the motion is with the correction?
Move to approve the motion with. Move to approve the approval of the minutes with the correction in mind.
Second.
Second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that passes unanimously. Okay. So let's see. So the next one. So we'll close that agenda item out. Go to agenda item number 2 for possible action, discussion, and possible action of community goals priorities and deliverable requests. Did you have anything on that, Keegan?
Only on the goals for the annual review of the 5-year CIP. The committee's memo was presented to council after our last meeting, and council did tentatively approve the CIP. Of course, there could be minor changes to that moving forward as we go through the O&M budget, but it is tentatively approved the way you guys had presented it in your memo. Other than that, there's not really an update to the other goals. We have included the deliverables tracker as a part of this committee goal item, and we'll continue to work on getting those items as you guys request them.
I did notice that there still needs to be a few items updated.
Okay.
It says that the presentation from SNWA was supposed to be December, so we're past that now.
Yep. I should back up a step. I saw Mr. Stubitz, our new utilities director, introducing himself before the meeting, but just in case you didn't get to meet him, this is Joe's second day at the city, and I'm here to assist through this meeting, kind of show him the ropes, and I'll be available in future meetings, but he'll be taking the lead after this meeting. But yeah, back to the SNWA, Mr. Scott Krantz. Haven't coordinated with him. He's gonna come out and give Joe a debrief tomorrow to discuss how we're involved with SNWA, the energy side of it. And then at that point, we're gonna try to nail down a time that he can finish up his analysis of the rooftop solar and when he can come out and give a presentation to you guys.
Okay. Yes, welcome, Joe.
Yeah, Joe Stubitz, grateful to be here. So, utilities director, background is in on the generation side. Working at all 3 dams, Hoover, Davis, Parker, doing some hands-on. Kind of came from an auditing role on power reliability. So that's what I've been doing the last 3.5 years. So really grateful to work with all of you. Look forward to working with you closely, and just really excited to serve the community with you guys.
See, do we have any, I guess, one thing I guess a little confused, I'm still trying to follow the agenda. So do we have is this a place we could have Andy put a background, or we have to wait till next time and do something? I'm not sure there's an official agenda item that can be done on.
Typically with, with council meetings, they have a council update at the end of it. I think right now would be fine for him to give us a little bio if he wants, or at the end of the meeting, either would be fine.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Andy, just to give us a little background. Yeah.
You want to do it now? Sure. Okay. Lloyd Anderson, Andy Anderson. Lived in Boulder City now for 6-7 years. My background is mostly in power. 10 years in the Navy, learning about power, and being on deployments on ships. Spent my first almost 20 years within Southern Cal Edison Mission Energy, and then moved out here, and then worked for Nevada Power for the past, or NV Energy now, for the past 15 years. Started off as an operations person, went into maintenance after that, and then went into, about 12 years ago, went into leadership management. I currently manage the North Las Vegas power plant for NV Energy. That's about my life. I'm married, got 3 kids, and happy.
That's good. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess, says what, I don't know, could we, Josh, I think that might not hurt just as a starting point to send Andy or had they already sent him something, I think it was the presentation that Dennis had given for.
You mean the welcome packet with everything in it?
Well,
that we gave, same one we gave to Dan, like that with all
if
the
he had something, I
information?
didn't know he had something either, because all I knew about was what was given to the new council members.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get that to you.
So I think, actually this is, I guess, a reasonable point in the agenda, because it's what we're working on is our goals. So if you looked at the agenda, the staff report showed what our major objectives are from the resolution that created us. And then we're trying to vet the goals, I guess is one way to say it, trying to and work with and trying to get a better understanding, I think, between the city and ourselves, try to find a way to move forward and the best we can help. One of the things I did see, I guess, Joe and Keegan, is that, so I think in some of these things it was stated that like the budget and stuff would be presented to the council with UAC recommendations. And so that's one of the things I guess we need to, so last time you gave us a calendar for the budget calendar. I'm still trying to make sure that I understand where we need to fit in. Do we need to give our recommendations to you, or I guess we'll probably see as the budget goes along, if it's anything minor, maybe we can just present it. If it's not minor, we might need a report. But I guess that would be, we might want to say possibly recommendations and questions. That might not be a bad idea to do. So relating to that, the question is that in the number 2, we have the 5-year, we have the budget. And in the electrical budget, can I ask that the non-electrical fund be explained or given us a little bit of explanation? I know not today, but in the future, I guess if it can be brought with the budget to explain that a little bit better. Also, none of the other projects none of the utilities have that I understand. So it's still, we've been asking about that and still trying to clarify what that is, and it's growing.
Yeah, when we get our O&M budget from finance, they're still putting their final touches on that. When we get it from them, that will include the non-electric in there, and we can provide that to you and get a better explanation for you.
Okay, appreciate it. Then I think, let's see, on the other, we've got the presentation. So the conservation, is that something, I think, like I said, I don't think this was updated since the last time. So right now the conservation plan was supposed to be in January. Was the intent to have it today, or just sometime in this month that you would email it to us? We
were hoping to have somewhat of a draft plan ready by now to present to you. It's just not complete yet.
Okay.
We've got some moving parts to it, looking at golf course for water conservation, turf removal throughout town. We need to have public meetings for those once we get a map together. So it's still a work in progress. Unfortunately, we don't have something ready to present for you.
Okay, not a problem. I was just trying to, because if we can keep the goals updated, and then yep. I think our big thing too for us is what you need from us. So what timelines we're looking at.
Okay.
Because right now, if we're looking at the budget and looking at the calendar, if we do need to write a report, it's probably no later than April, and most likely March. And so we'd probably actually need something by March so we could finalize it by April, if I'm understanding correctly.
I think that timeline would work well. We have our meetings, the directors and staff have meetings with finance set up for later this month. So we should get our hands on it hopefully before then. So we'll have a copy to the UAC by the February meeting and discuss that there. We'll have a little bit more information because we've already had our meeting with finance. So I think we can make our recommendations based off of that. And then in March, make any changes, and by April, well, hopefully in March, but if we need to, there should be April also.
Okay. So then we're also in that item number 2, we've talked about rate review. So in item 5 and 6 of this agenda, I'd like to talk about electric rates and water rates. Okay. So we'll put that on to the later part of the agenda. And then I think the last page, we have number 4. So it's just, it'd be helpful to update, is that the IRP, you were going to try to get something to us by the spring and not October. It still states it would be October. So I think the earlier we start reviewing that would be the better. And I guess maybe I'll just iterate a few times too. I think if we can start, maybe something to think about is having some of the statistical data available. So Joe, in the future, something like how much power was you had on a quarterly basis or something, power and water and all that, something that what's feasible to help kilowatt hours demand and stuff like that. Something that so we can just keep it at handle on what's going on, especially with the water. I think is going to be something. So we do have the water, I believe, on the list, the amount of water. So, but just something that's what might be feasible to present.
You talking about demand? Is it?
Overall, if I'm understanding, we're somewhere around 148 to 150 some million kilowatt hours a year of power for the city, and how that's broken out. And then we've got anywhere from 50 to 51 megawatts as the peak demand for the year, the highest peak in the. So just understanding what we're at, and I don't know if it helps or if it's too much problem, what would be the peak of the month? I don't know if that's something that's, so if not asking every month, that's probably a little much, but on a quarterly basis. So if we said how much was done, how much was used for the water, how much kilowatt hours were used for electricity, and how much, I guess, gallons, and then maybe even present that as how many million acre feet over the year. So we try to, and that's the other thing I think we need to do is, okay, what numbers are thrown out there? And then, you're looking at million acre feet in one statement of the press, and then millions of gallons and billions of gallons. But I think if we might want to say a couple of different terms, because the million acre feet is sort of a little more easy to understand to a certain extent than billions of gallons.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that's something we can. I mean, my guess is peak demand for power is going to be during the summer months. So that's and we've got some ideas on some ways to possibly curb demand during those times. I'd like to bring to you guys at some point. But yeah, no, that's something we could look into. Constant units for sure. That we got 300,000 acre feet allotment a year, right, in the state, and this is our first year federally declared shortage. So it's really good idea for us to all hands on deck, get ahead of the curve as far as our consumption on the water. So.
Right. So I believe this. So we can talk about it. I believe in both places, because in the goals we're talking about conservation and the IRP. So that sort of leads to both. Having some of the data gives us a better idea of what's going on, and so I think we can put it in both places unless we need some type of update area. But I believe the goal allows us to do that, to work with some of the updates, or like I said, in the IRP or water conservation. So whichever. Again, that can be done in the future. Did anybody else have anything on the goals? Okay, so we're hoping to have, well, I guess that'll be in the future agenda, but we're looking at doing something in the budget next time. Yep. Okay. Okay, so if there is no further comments on the goals, and is there anything else from the city?
No.
Okay. Again, thank you for that, and thank you for the list. I think we still need to work on that a little bit more, but we're getting there. Appreciate it. Okay, so we'll close out item number 2, and we'll go to item number 3, update on the ongoing capital improvement projects and utility fund capital project year to date provided by staff.
So we didn't have a chance to get this included in the packet, but the 11x17 that's in front of you has our status update that we do every other month. I'll notate some of the more key projects, and then if you have any questions, ask away. Project E1909, the fourth one down for electric. That's the 4 kV to overhead line insulation, the project that Power Construction's been helping us out with. We're estimating they're about 75% just ongoing. We're working on a contract extension with them just to get them throughout the end of the year. We have the funds in there, but just got to make sure the contract's updated. The San Felipe to Mendota feeder, E2101, staff finished up their design before the Christmas break. We reviewed it, and there was some minor changes that needed to be done to that. We're making those minor changes, and then it'll be ready to go out to construction. And then a number of these other ones you'll see in-house design or design in progress. We're working with PowerTech, the company that Mr. Todd had put us in contact with. They're working on a scope and fee for design of 4 different feeder projects right now. Hoping to have that scope and fee yet this week, and then negotiate with them so they can start the design on all these feeder projects that we're not unable to do in-house. And ultimately, if we like the product we're getting, we'll continue with them with larger projects.
Then just to be a technical weenie, I guess, sorry, but so can we, so the ones that we get the contract with the consultant, we'll put as
Yep.
working with consultant
Yep,
instead
as
of
soon
in-house?
as we have that scope and fee contract assigned, all those will go from in-house design to consultant design.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We changed the status of the pole replacement. That was mainly to purchase poles. You'll see down at the very bottom, I think it was on the bottom. It might have been on a previous one. We shifted funds from that pole replacement program up to the 4 kV project because that's essentially where the work's being done. The money was just being spent to purchase the poles out of that E2105. And as soon as we take or receive all the poles, then that project will be closed out. E2202, the Red Mountain distribution, we opened bids on that at the end of December. It was a little higher than we expected, but that was due to the pole replacement. When we initially had the conversation with PAR, just to get a rough idea of what the project was going to cost. I don't know if misunderstanding is the right word, but didn't understand the full scope of replacing the poles out there, so that's why the dollar amount's a little bit more. So we're working with PAR was the only person to submit a bid on that one. We're working with them right now to see if we can come to an agreement, and then that project would be awarded if with council's approval.
Question on that, are they gonna replace a lot more poles than you thought they were going to replace?
No, it was, what about up to 25 poles? But when we had the initial discussion with them, they hadn't gone out there and actually assessed
Okay.
which poles and.
Probably some of the ones up on the mountain itself, where you gotta
Yep.
helicopter them or tightline them in, yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
So that was the cause of the price increase. Without the poles, the price was actually cheaper than what we were expecting, but the labor to get the poles there and everything was more expensive.
I guess, because right now we don't have the current prices we just have did I miss the spreadsheet? We only have the percentages, not the cost on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, the spreadsheet that we normally give you with all the costing on it, the prices, that it goes to council before we present it to you guys, and that is going to council next week. So then you guys will have a copy of that afterwards.
I think I saw, so is that in the, if I saw the agenda correctly, that was $1 million something? So actually it was less than 1 point, because we put it in as 1.2. You had 1.2, but you were hoping for it to be a lot less. Is that what you're saying?
1.2, and then after our discussion with PAR, we assumed or knew that we would be able to move 400,000 to the 4 kV project, and then the bid came in higher, and that was because of the miscommunication on the poles, like I said.
So the 1 million is, because it was under.
It was 1,093,000.
Right, so is that the final theirs, or is that less than, or is it more than that now?
No, that is the price that they submitted.
Okay.
So as long as we can come to an agreement with them, then we'll either move funds back to that project line item, or ask council for more money.
Then you also got, if I see in the agenda correctly, you're asking for the new contract with PARS for the 4K. That's what you were saying, maybe, okay.
Yeah, we're working on that right now.
So on that project, are they gonna replace all the conductor or just add a neutral?
I'll let the expert answer all that.
On that project, It'll be just changing it from delta to Y, so we'll be adding a neutral, changing out all the arms and replacing, like I said, up to 25 poles. The increased cost that Mr. Keegan was talking about is because of the going up the mountain, the access exponentially raised the cost, and it's going to be about 15 of those poles there. So that's why the increase was so drastic. That wasn't taken into account when the original walkthrough was done. But that's the difference right there. So yeah, also we'll be adding a fiber, 24 count fiber to up to Red Mountain. That'll tie into the city fiber that we're doing around the city as well. So
So that'll be an underbuild down below the neutral?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, right below the neutral. Neutral will be under the arms, of course, and then under that it'll be the fiber.
Okay, good.
Now that has two, see, if I read one of the aspects of it, that supports two additional, it supports Bureau Reclamation and then,
Snacks in the Bureau, and I want to say part of, I know it's those three.
do we get a little bit of input? Because I remember when the Bureau did it, a lot of times we used, or when Western would do it, it seems like when Western had some of the fiber, there was a little bit of shared cost once in a while.
Yeah, the overall project, there are other entities that are interested in sharing in that cost, including going up there. So the lion's share will, of course, be the cities, but yeah, there are other entities, at least one other one for sure. Parks, I think it's the Park Service. I don't know exactly, but that's trying to tie into that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Murph. The next one on the list, UE161, that's the BC tap transformer. All along we'd been updating that was going to be done at the start of the new year, Christmas time. They are 95% done and should be finishing up shortly. Oh no, sorry, that's the breaker one. That one we're just waiting on as-built, and then we'll be able to close that project out. I was thinking of the BC tapped overhead, the E2001 up towards the top. That one, still more delays in receiving their product, but they are continuing to work. They did some work over the Christmas break in front of the school since school was out, and that was a perfect time to do that, so they didn't have to impact the schools. And then UE182, the feeder Arizona Street, we had to put them on delay. They were scheduled to come in and finish up over at the shop, Substation 1, but there was conflicts with having to shut down Sub 1 and Sub 2, and Sub 2 at the same time as PAR. So we put this one on the back burner because that was the best thing to do, but they're going to come back in mid-February and finish that up in about 4 to 6 weeks. Jumping down to water. The second one, W2006, we're continuing on with our copper service replacement. We had a project start last week. Another one, another one going to council next week to be awarded. So there'll be 2 of them ongoing at pretty much the same time.
So is that the contract for 21 and 22? Is that what, so we're catching up?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just continuing to get those out the door as quickly as we can. We're actually probably run out of money before the end of the year for the 22 money. Just because the number of the projects that we're getting, staff's doing that in-house, just putting together a real basic map, a list of all the services. The project that's ongoing right now is just random throughout town. It just happened to be that way, but we try to focus them on a subdivision or a neighborhood. You get a better cost by doing that, but unfortunately not all of them are located in one area. So every once in a while we'll do a miscellaneous project.
Well, that's the one I think was a little unclear in the minutes. Was I believe it was asked if the copper was purchased for this item, and so I don't know if it was clarified in the minutes or if I caught it correctly. If the copper has been or can be purchased for.
We're looking into that right now. I remember you asking about that, and yeah, we're looking into seeing if we can pre-purchase it and save money that way.
Okay.
We discussed the third one, W2008, before, the PRV design. That was originally intended to be on the new 16-inch line that runs out to the I-11 intersection. Since that one's not in use, we're looking at removing that money and putting it on the existing line that water's actually flowing through.
So I think even if I remember correctly, the council also asks that the lines could be renamed. We had mentioned something, and I believe the council also did, if it could be renamed. So is that something that we can do? Is that a problem, Carol? Or since it's in Eunice, we're stuck with the names? It would be helpful to have two different designations.
If we transfer those funds or create a project for putting that PRV design on the 14-inch line, then yeah, we can make that designation.
Thank you.
Make that a little clearer. Next one I want to point out, W2201, the last of the water meter replacement program. Mr. Joshua and I have had a few emails back and forth from the grant program. They're short-staffed just like everybody else, so we're waiting on a grant administrator to take over the paperwork, and it's not official. We haven't signed anything, but it sounds like we're going to be getting the $75,000 for the meter replacement program, and of course we have our $75,000 match. They have mentioned that there are other grant opportunities, but with us having the ARPA funds, we're not sure it would be worth trying to get other grants with all the hoops you have to jump through with the federal funds versus using the ARPA funds, but it is an opportunity for more funds. Sewer, not much of an update on that. The couple of ones at the bottom of sewer, the chlorine contact chamber, concrete aeration basins, we had discussed putting those on hold to see if the new treatment plant was going to move forward, so they continue to be on hold.
So is there any news, something that might start up again in the beginning of the year? Or when is some information expected on the treatment with SNWA?
I've had a couple email and conversations with them. We're trying to set up a conversation, just try to work through some of the stipulations that they're looking for. We just want clarification on some of the stuff, and then it sounds like they want to move forward with doing a contract. So it does sound very promising.
Now, is the committee going to have a chance to look at it before so is it be a draft contract or?
Yeah, they'd send a draft to us, to the city. Of course, our legal team would need to review that and before anything went forward, and then council would have to bless it. So I'm sure they would want you guys to have your eyes on it as well.
Because it falls under the revenue requirements, because if it's going to have, as Howard has pointed out before, and then I'll turn it over to him, and Keegan yourself, is that depending on what they do, it could increase our maintenance cost, it could increase personnel. So we would have an additional revenue requirement, which would increase the budget, possibly increase the rate too. And so if that's what needs to happen, great. But is it going to be like any options, or is it going to be here's what we're going to do, one option?
Options meaning what?
Well, if I understood correctly, the way Howard was putting it, it was that there might be a couple ways that can be done. So at $25 million is what I was understanding. It was going to be a pretty big aspect.
Oh, you mean like options on how we're going to treat it? What type of treatment plant? Is that what you're asking?
Correct.
Yeah, nothing's been decided on that. They would just want us to be able to treat it enough that it's okay to put on a golf course or the park. So we would have to hire an engineering company to help us design that, and we would be asking for your guys' input on that as well.
Okay, so the contract is just saying they're willing to start negotiating, because I thought the contract was saying here's what we were going to do.
No.
So that's what I was.
No, the contract is basically saying we're going to give you the money to build a treatment plant so you can treat your effluent to be able to put on the golf course or the park. There's no specifics in it saying this is the type of plant you have to build or anything like that.
Okay, well, thank you. That helps clarification quite a bit. Howard, was that anything else you had? No. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's really the major items. If you guys have any questions on any of the others, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
See, I guess I guess it'll be probably for the budget. I had a question on, but I guess we can just do it probably next time in the budget with the landfill. It's,
Okay.
the two reserves that we have for those, the closure fee and the construction fee.
Okay.
So, just making sure I understand, I believe I understand the usage, but I saw it at one point, and I think it's a little different, so.
Okay.
Did anybody else have any comments on the ongoing capital? Okay, so anything else, Keegan, on that then?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we will, close item number 3 and go to item number 4 for possible action, discussion, and recommendation to the City Council regarding the 5-year capital improvement plan and the use of the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds. Did you have something on that, Keegan?
As I said earlier, council tentatively approved the budget. There was no designation for ARPA funds in there. The city manager and staff are putting together a plan to present to council on what we feel is the best ways to spend those ARPA funds. But as you saw in the previous meeting, the rate model sheets that we included with the CIP, at the bottom of that for water and wastewater was the preliminary way to spend the ARPA funds. And it more or less showed that all of the CIP projects we have for water and wastewater would be covered by the ARPA funds. And I believe that wouldn't even spend the full amount. We're also thinking of trying to come up with additional projects, maybe a major water meter program, possibly using some of those funds for the irrigation replacement at the Muni Golf Course, because that would fall under water conservation. Those are only the 2 that I can come up with right now, but we're throwing around more ideas to be able to make sure that we are able to spend all the funds that we're receiving.
One of the things I mentioned in the last meeting is with the dark fiber we're putting up on our, above our 69 kV loop.
Mm-hmm.
That dark fiber could be sold back to the water section.
Okay.
Because that's a very costly thing to put in OPGW and then have it all sitting there dark because nobody's using it because it was put in for the electrical system.
Yeah.
So we could actually interconnect our lift stations down Hemingway Valley to that out of sub 6. Make a tap off of sub 6, come up to the lift station on that away, and that stuff could all be monitored. Central. We could go down Buchanan even and pick up the golf courses and the wastewater treatment plant. So I think we need to look at that as that being using some of that money that we're talking about. We do have funds that can tie into it directly without any shady deals or underhanded things, and that way it benefits everybody.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. And I know we do have one staff member that's heavily involved in the SCADA system, more so electrical, but he's looking at both the wastewater side as well. So yep, that would definitely be another way that we could expend those funds.
Is there anything else, is there any of the flood control that needs, because I believe the flood control is limited to being within a certain distance from existing flood basins. So is there anything that needs to be lengthened or possibly constructed to meet that the flood control could then take it from that point on? Do we have to do anything in Boulder City's costs, I guess is what I'm looking at? Because that would fall under that ARPA, I would hope.
Flood control, not to my knowledge, would be covered by that, but yeah, we already have a 10-year plan with Clark County, their flood control district, and we're continuing to work on those projects. We're finishing up the Hemingway Phase 2B project going down the other side of the hill, and since that was a larger project, especially for Boulder City, we're not at the top of the list to receive any funds for another year or so. We're asking for design funds for next year. And of course, flood control would pay us back for those.
I was just, part of it was it sounded like we weren't close enough to a basin in some of the areas that does need work on, and I didn't know how that might be incorporated.
Yeah, it's something I can ask on, but to my knowledge, we wouldn't be able to use the ARPA funds for that.
Okay, I probably misunderstood the full comment, the criteria. And I guess I probably should have asked in the ongoing, but hopefully for the 5-year plan too. I didn't see the 6 million for the budget, for the agenda, unless I missed it on, the council for the 11th. Is that something that's possibly gonna be done on the 25th?
That is scheduled to go on the 25th. I was ready to go on the 11th after talking with finance. They're going forward with a few items in finance. So it was better for us to go at the same time for moving that $6 million to purchase the 6 transformers.
Okay, so then that'll be good. Then we'll have a good understanding in the budget time in February then.
Yeah.
To see what's going on.
And yeah, as Larry, you know, you were there giving your presentation for the CIP, but I presented to the council when we were doing the tentative approval that I was going to come back in January asking for the $6 million for the pre-purchase, and it seemed like most, if not all, council members were nodding in agreement. Of course, there was no vote on that, and they'll do that in 3 weeks, but I'm hopeful that they'll approve that.
Yeah, that's the reason I brought it. I guess I was just making sure it was still going onward positive.
Yep.
It sounded like it was good, and I just wanted to keep it going. Thank you. So I guess then now, if we can just, I don't know if we want to, well, we can get that when we talk about the agenda items, but I guess just keep the 5 years so we don't have any confusion like we did last year, where we just sort of keep an update on how the 5-year plan is going and how it interacts with the budget.
Yeah, anything that changes during the O&M, Carol will be updating in our ClearGov system, and if there are any changes, then we'll make sure that we point out any changes that council wanted.
Okay, now, and again, I guess there's a certain amount the finance does and a certain, so we have had a overall spreadsheet that showed the 5-year plan a lot clearer than that presentation in the packet. So is that something, because right now I guess it's the ClearGov that is 3 pages that explains the project. So if anything's modified there, it's really hard to see. Yeah. You have to go through every single thing to see what's been changed. There is somewhat of an indication at the front of the list, but that's a 5-year thing. It doesn't say what happened in what year.
Yeah.
Where we've had it in the past, we've shown the 5 years. It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to talk to Carol about it yet. She was taking some vacation time for Christmas, visiting her family, but I want to try to figure out if there's another reporting option within ClearGov. I've been messing around with it, but apparently I don't know enough about the system to be able to generate a report like you're asking about. If all else fails, we might just have to go back to the old spreadsheet way just to show what we have in ClearGov.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, so does you have anything else on the 5-year?
Nope.
Does anybody have any comments on the 5-year plan? Anybody else? Okay, so we will close item number 4 and go to item number 5, discussion of the electrical integrated resource, rooftop solar, and electrical rates. We didn't ask you to do anything for 5 and 6, but does the city have anything for 5? Okay. Does anybody on the committee here have any comments on 5?
Well, I always bring up the rates, but are they looking at that when they're coming up with the budget for 23? If they can reduce rates and still have enough revenue to cover their expenses?
I know they always look into the revenue and what the rates will be, but I don't know if they're looking into if it's possible to reduce them. I would have to ask them, and I'll make sure I make note of that so we can ask them that.
Okay, the same with the water.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
Keegan, we got that new carport going in for the police department. Who's doing the design on the rooftop solar for that? Is it Public Works or is it going to be electrical side?
It wouldn't be Public Works.
Okay, I would like to take and comment that we need to take and get somebody to look at that before we get too far along on design, like we got stuck with the last one and we're not 100%
Yeah.
producing power for the city. Okay, if we can get that put into the police station, from that carport, put it into the police station service, that will drop our police department's electric rate. And also, it'll allow us to put the charging stations in for future, in broad parentheses,
Yep.
and the electric vehicles that the police department will be acquiring. Because the one that we got from the last time we got stiffed, there's a lot of improvements that can be done still to this day, and that thing's been in service now 4 years at only 10% capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at future charging stations, both for City Hall. I'm sure we'd look at them for the police station. We're also looking at them possibly along Nevada Way.
Yeah, well, as a committee member, I'd like to take and be somewhat involved in reviewing, just bouncing the prints, bumping them and making sure they're right, because the last time it was very poorly designed, for no room for expansion.
Okay.
Anybody else? Well, I would like to take the opportunity, I guess, we can do both, like Marty is, talk about the rates. That's, so I don't mean to bring up any negativity, any things. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to go forward. Was one thing that I believe we didn't get a good chance with Raftillis's report. We never really went over the rates. We never really talked about rates. What happened was they suggested 3%. So they did a cost of service, and from that cost of service, they said we should do this, but we could reduce it by 3% and then do something other from that. So the rest of it is I believe the council, the committee, I think we all agreed we did not agree with the cost of service report. And so, but it was due to many factors, we didn't discuss it. So I don't think we've ever talked about rates in a major detail. We did a little bit when we were trying to do the resolutions, trying to go forward and change them, but I don't think we understand the tiers and a lot of that aspect to try to get it. I think in the water and we're talking electrical right now, I think we should look at seeing the first tier being at cost or as nearly at cost as we can get it to help the lower income families. So I know the water's higher, and I think the energy might be higher for the first tier also than is needed. And so that's something I would like to, talk about. So I guess trying to figure out how we can do it in the future, and then so if we have this meeting, I believe will be a little shorter. I don't know exactly how to discuss things, but I'd like to get, we can, we're all here to talk, so I'm not asking for any right away from the city. I guess it's more or less among us to what people have thought about or what we need to do as a meeting. We might have to have whether we can have it as a regular meeting, and we can discuss that into the agenda items, but where we would focus on the rates, where we can sort of talk about it. Some of the information, historical information, I don't think can be brought up within a month or two from what I'm understanding. It's just still a matter of what's going on and what we can do. So what can be done, if there's anything that can be done in the future, or if we need to wait till next year to do it. My understanding, the easy way to do the rate change or adjustment is within the budget, but we can do it outside the budget. So my understanding is we'd want to have something by, I guess, May or June at the latest, but actually May. It'd be April would be the best bet, but we could probably sneak something in. Well, not the word sneak, but we could put something in possibly. But I'm not sure we'd have the full information to understand everything. So part of it is how does the city function? How does Boulder City function compared to base? Why were some of these tiers set up? So I believe, Ned, you've probably worked with a little bit of it, but it was still somebody else that did. But the more we understand, because I think that's the thing, and Ned helped me out here, so just since we can talk about it, is that was part of our problem, I think, with Raftillis's cost of service, saying that the commercial should be less than the residents. Whereas I think a lot of the reasons that some of the rates were established that way is that, if I understand correctly, so we didn't have some companies coming over the hill and trying to use Hoover's power, trying to use the cheap power. And so if you make the power too cheap, then you're gonna hurt, the residents are gonna be paying for other aspects that they don't need to pay for. So those are things that we just wanna understand and figure out, just get the facts. If once we can understand the facts, then it's like, okay, well, it's either, it is what it is, or we can sort of adjust things. I think there might be room in some of the adjustments, and I think with this last rate hike that we had the 3 years in a row we had 2 years with the power and 3 years with water. I have to make sure I'm saying it right, but I'm pretty sure it was just two major hikes. So it was 17th, 18th, it was 17th, 18th, and 19th, the 19th and 20th were the same. So I guess it was three hikes in the electrical. And, but I need to confirm that to make sure I didn't misstate it. Well, let me just, I guess I can check it right here. Make sure I'm saying it correctly. When we went from the current, we only had two. We had two increases in electrical. Just 17 and 18, and that carried us through. So when we did only have two increases, one from 16 to 17, and then 17 to 18, and 19 was the same one. But I think some of the power aspects and demand aspects got put in as a percentage, and not necessarily what it really was needed. It's just and that's one thing we never got a chance to talk with Raftillis. We never really asked that question to do it as a group and get the city. So that's one of the things I would like to understand better. And am I off base, or does that something the whole committee? Greg?
I recommend we do have a discussion on it, because some of the questions we asked a couple months back still have not come back with answered. And that's why are we charging multiple duplexes and quad units with a single water meter at the street, 4 different service charges?
Yep, and I'll bring that.
And we never got a hold of that. But I do implore that we consider a workshop in March, because some of these things we cannot discuss them on a general meeting. So we need to have a workshop so we can open up this rate study and this rate discussion, and we can get this thing started. And then that'll give them time, the city, time to get answers back to us as to what they're gonna do with a 4-plex unit on a property with a single water meter that's getting 4 service charges.
Yeah, we'll do that at the water conservation.
Right, but what I'm saying is that some of the workshop items that we can bring up and talk about.
Right. Well, I guess that thing too, I guess we can get, I think we're still a little confused on some of the way the open meeting laws are. So if we can get some input from legal maybe to understand, is it better to have a workshop? Is it better to have a regular meeting? Is there really any difference? Because the only thing, Greg, is whether we wouldn't be able to vote if it's a workshop, and we don't really need to vote. I think we could do consensus by just saying, does everybody agree in a workshop? But it would be nice to have legal, because I think the last thing I've heard over the last 6 months or so is some of them saying there's no difference. So I'm still confused on the difference between I know the difference, one part is between a workshop and the meetings, we don't have the voting, but whether it's any advantage of having a workshop just over a regular meeting.
So just kind of getting into the specifics with the Raftillis, like if we're not able to get the data that you're looking for, the questions answer with that report being done, this is something that's my understanding it's going to be done every 5 years. So in a few years when we do this, the next study, to get everything that we didn't get completely understood into the bid for whoever does, the next model, because we have the data. And we have the model. So if it's a lack of understanding of why they did certain things, there's some industry practices, and I'm not totally familiar with how they came about with, doing certain things and assumptions, but the data is the same. So, if there's specific questions that we as a committee want answered from the next study, like let's get that into the bid and get. What did we miss? As far as what you feel the questions were not answered to the satisfaction of the committee from Raftillis. Make sure that goes in on the front end for the next time if we're not able to rehash this with them.
Okay. Well, one of the things, like I said, that I stated several times, and it was that the request from, and them, what they put it, their proposal, and Raftellus' proposal themselves, was that they would do a rate study. There was no rate study done. And so that's one of my key points I've stated several times. And if you look at the report, when it says you go to the rate study location, it just says, well, using the rate cost and what they suggested, that's what they did. But it doesn't, I would have assumed, and would have liked to talk about it, and that never was discussed, was that, okay, the rate study would go over why is, do you understand the tiers? Can Boulder City explain it? Can they explain it? So I want to understand Boulder City. I don't want to understand general utility practices. And even a rate study could have done some of that, saying here's the general rate study, here's what Boulder City's doing, here's things that match, here's things that don't match. That's the type of thing that do it. Plus, in our objectives, I apologize if I was starting to wind up. I'm getting a little passionate maybe. It was just frustrating, and that's one thing at the time. So, but one of the things is that Boulder City is different. Boulder City does do it. To a certain extent, it's similar to the priority use and reclamation as it is, and Boulder City did come from reclamation to a certain extent. We were given our utility from the government, so we have certain advantages that other cities don't have, and that's not always taken into consideration. And so there's other aspects of the budget and the rates that Boulder City has that is completely different than the Valley. And I didn't know if that was taken into consideration. So we didn't get to ask those questions. If some of it was brought up, they were not answered. So part of it was in the scope and it wasn't answered, in my opinion. And we had never had, as a committee, we had some issues that we couldn't get into those details to agree if we all understood or understood it the same way.
I might just briefly go through some of that back in the day, is that Boulder City originally had an allocation, well, they still do have an allocation to Hoover, but with the uprates, I thought they had what they called Hoover A, Hoover B, and then they got some Hoover C after the surplus water for so many years. But we also had the stuff that came out of Glen Canyon Dam, the CRSP resource. And so those three resources were pretty much hydro, and it meant to Boulder City residents, and that was one of the reasons they put the growth control ordinance back in 1980, was to kind of preserve what we had coming to us. And for years we had very low electric rates, about half of what Nevada Power would charge. And there were some companies that were beginning to look at that in Las Vegas that were thinking, hey, why don't we move our facility to Boulder City and take advantage of that cheap power? And so we put into effect some rates that basically would recognize that. So users that had a demand of greater than 500 kW, 500 kilowatts or half a megawatt demand, had to pay, and there was a term for it, it escapes me right now, I can't remember the name of the rate, but basically it charged rates that were more like what Nevada Power was charging down in Las Vegas, so that we could preserve what resources we had for the residents of Boulder City and the small businesses in Boulder City. And that kind of went away a few years ago, but I think we could still kind of hold the line with that and recognize and create a rate that would look at advantaging the smaller, or the residents and the smaller businesses, and would still allow the larger companies to come here, but they would be paying a rate more equivalent to what Nevada Power would have. And so we did that for a number of years, and then we kind of got away from that the last few years, but I think we could kind of hold the line on for the smaller users, the users that use maybe 3,000 or 4,000 kilowatt hours a month, and the business is the same way. And then the companies that come in are going to use a megawatt or more of demand, and maybe 100, 200,000 kilowatt hours a month. Go ahead and charge those the rates, because with the structure we have with the Colorado River Commission and the resources, we can still use our hydro from the government, but they're taking care of us as far as resources that they can pretty much meet our needs anymore. And that energy comes in at a price, but we can pass that along, but also design the rates so that we can still cover our costs and make money on the deal, and still have benefits that would flow to the residents of Boulder City. And that's the way it used to be, and I think it could still be that way with the right rate structure.
Thanks. And that, I'm sorry, Keegan, go ahead.
Well, I was just taking a step back. I was thinking, in the meantime, I believe that the rate model still has, at least what I've seen from finance, still has the operation costs, operating revenues, operating expenses. They have our capital projects in there. I'm just looking at the electric one right now. And then it says what our minimum fund balance needs to be at the end of the year. I think we can work with finance, staff can work with finance to figure out how much excess money is in there after you take all our capital projects out. That'll give us an idea of how much more money is in there. I think they'll probably have to go out further than the 5 years just to make sure we don't have large capital projects that are going to put us below the 20%. But that'll at least give you guys a number to start working with, and then we can start looking at the tiers of how to apply those tiers and to see if we can reduce the rates, because we know if, say, we got an extra $5 million sitting in there, that would be a possible way to reduce the rates. And I think we could apply that for electric and water.
Yeah, so the electric is the way we see the package that we got last time looks really tight, but the water, especially the sewer, whether it's 500% higher, so we can talk about that in the water conservation section a little bit. But yeah, I think that's what I guess I'm trying to get at is trying to get, I'd prefer not have to wait another 4 years, I guess 4 or 5 years to get another survey to get a better complete understanding. So if I'm understanding, I think we're all saying the same things, that the data's there. So we just need to figure out, can we understand the data among ourselves to make the right assumptions? Or not assumptions, to work with the facts. So I would prefer to do it as soon as possible instead of waiting for another study to be done. And that is part of the goals and the objectives, is that we do look at rate adjustments.
Yep.
So I would prefer not to have to wait another 5 years.
And I agree with you, looking at it now is a great idea, but I also agree with what Joe's saying is the next time this comes around, we need to make sure that RFP is set up, the request for proposals are set up exactly, has all the information in there that we want to see. It sounds like it might not have been thorough enough. I wasn't a part of that process. I don't know what all that was requested when they had originally did that, but with your guys' help, we can make sure that we're asking for all the information you want to see.
I agree to go forward. That would be great. It's just, and that, because also one of the problems is that some of the old studies we have some information. The report said that hadn't been a cost analysis done for a long time. There was one done in 2012. So they were indicating that it was several that had been done. I got the impression they were saying back further than 2012 that hadn't been done. 2012 was done, and they had recommended 2 options, and they were both a lot more minor than this extensive one with the cost. And I think that's what caught a lot of us, was that when they wanted to, especially, we never had a chance to really talk about the city's involvement. We've been saying that the city shouldn't pay more than cost, so the wholesale cost, and their first report was that the city should pay retail. And so if the city doesn't pay retail, it all fell onto the residential rates, not the commercial. Most of it fell on the residential rate. So that's part of what bothered me about the way it was done, is the way they interpreted where the money should fall. And then they did it with substations. And so you'll understand it better, I think, Joe, if, looking at the substations, the transformers, and the distribution, and pretty much most of that fell into the residential bucket, which then increased the rate and said, okay, the commercial doesn't have as much on that. I'm not sure if you can completely say that. So that's the reason I myself, but we never really had a chance as a committee to talk about that. So I think it's going to take a couple meetings. And so if we could find something that would say there should be an adjustment for the coming year, that's one thing. If not, I think then if we can go parallel and just keep discussing it as we're going and get more understanding of it. But I still think, and I guess I'll harp on the thing, I think we need to understand, as Ned has said, the history of Boulder City, understand what the intent was and what the intents of these different tiers were. And if maybe we might even want to revise the tiers a little bit and maybe add one or another. I've got a suggestion in the water aspect. But again, sort of be similar, is the tier for the first power. Power might be a little different than water, but what is the general household need? And then that we want as affordable as possible. And then we start putting in conservation matters. So in the next one, water is more, I think, a conservation issue. But does anybody else have, go ahead, Marty.
Well, I was just going to comment. I was under the understanding that as part of what Raf Tillis did last year was to give us software that could be updated from year to year. And so, I mean, I thought, is finance or Josh, have you been working on that to?
Well, it's not software per se. It's they left us with a Excel model, forecast model, and that model is what we used to give you guys last week. Those different scenarios we presented you guys, we got that from that model, and so yeah, that it wasn't software. It was just an Excel model.
Yeah, okay.
But I guess part of it is too, relating to that, I think what happened in 2016 to 17, they just took percentages. And so that's why if we're not careful with this model, it could be the same thing. It would be just, okay, we can either reduce it, like we did last time. We just had 3% and we just did it across the board. But maybe we take and we adjust the tiers a little bit. And so that's why it's important to look at the overall aspect and look at the resolutions, look at how things were done. So this is a good starting point, and it's a great tool, so I'm not trying to do it. And it's something we'd want to talk about. But I think we need to go into a little more depth. And as we will in the water, as Greg brought up, there's some things with the multi-meters, with single meter for multi-units that we need to understand more on. So that's what I'm trying to get at is how do we do that? So, you know, we've taken a little bit of time with my explanation. I would see this to be several hours, or at least, and then do we do it over several times? But again, we're limited on time, so we wanted to wait for the budget, but we also, now we're still in the same time crunch that we've only got a few months, which seems like a lot, but it's not. We meet once a month.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's my understanding that the chairman can call a special meeting, you know, based on the resolution as I read it. So, you know, maybe a special meeting dedicated to, you know, what you're talking about, using the Raf Tillis data and kind of understand the tiers. That history, I appreciate that, because that was news to me, you know, and kind of how they did that. And just kind of to segue, I know we're still talking about 5, but getting into 6, want to make sure that the conservation piece of it, that the electric and the water is tied together. So, because, you know, our capacity and how much generation we're able to produce at the dam is tied to how much water's in the lake. So those go hand in hand, and those rates, you know, are affected as well. So we want to kind of, it's a holistic approach that we really want to keep both, you know, water conservation and electric pretty much tied together, because that's where we're getting our power.
Correct, and when we go forward with the meeting, to make clear what you're saying, I appreciate that, is that we're going to want to talk rates overall. We don't want to make two separate and say water, and we just want to look at the rates overall and make sure it's all together. So that's where the open meeting and the agendas make it a little bit more difficult trying to, you know, understand what we can do within a certain section. That's what I'm trying to stay within the bounds, is when I'm hedging a little bit. But I totally agree. So if we had a meeting, and we have done that in the past, it's just sometimes getting everybody's schedule together to have more than one meeting a month gets complicated. We were having, I think, scheduling problems on both sides, with the city and our side, in the last 6 months or so, if I understood correctly. We were trying to do that. We had several months, we had 2 meetings to compensate for that. And that was one of the things we were doing with Raf Tillis' report and stuff like that. Is that something the committee would be willing to do again, as 2 meetings in a month? Yeah. Okay, I'm getting the head nods. That I've got, we just have to work with everybody's schedule. That's the hard part. And I think part of it is working with the calendar. We've had several things. I guess it doesn't have to be on a Wednesday. But that's what we stayed with for quite a bit. But we're willing to. It's just a matter of everybody's schedules to do that. But but yes, to work with the rates overall. So I think you're gonna look at, two meetings minimum, because it's like now, it's like, okay, let's flush out, and that's why I wanted to use today's time to flush out some ideas, which then would be, okay, what time does the staff have, what information does the staff have, and then we can actually, Ned's information, and the other things, we can combine our knowledge at the meeting and see, here's what we all understand, now how can we make do we want to change anything? Can we make it better, or is it good as it is? So I don't want to assume that anything has to be done, but we have seen a few things that are a little, as we will discuss real quickly in the next one about that the single meter with multi-units. There are a few things that didn't quite seem right, and we just like to get a better understanding. And then if there's something that can be done, then let's see what we can do.
So Larry, I'd suggest between Joe, Josh, and I, we'll get with finance, knowing that this is the worst time of year for them to be doing additional work, but we'll get with them to see if we can get that first step to see what possible excess revenue there is. And then based on the timeline we get from them, then we'll coordinate with you guys on a possible additional meeting to set up and just have it focused just on rates. And then we'll also dig into any information we can provide on the different tiers, and any other questions that come out of the next item on the agenda.
Okay. So, but also, Joe, as conservation, what I was thinking was possibly is, let's see, what do we have? We have 3 tiers in electrical, I think. Is that, make sure for residential?
So are we moving on
No,
to?
it's still electrical.
To item 6 yet, or?
No, I'm just talking
still
about
on 5?
conservation for electrical.
Okay.
So that's the reason I'm staying with that, is that we have 3 tiers, and then, but sort of I think we have 4 tiers in water. But what you might want to do is you could say, okay, the first tier or 2 is going to be a reasonable amount of energy, and maybe the third, and then you have a 4th that you have that's more conservation intended, and if you go over this amount, then it's gonna be a higher cost than even it is now. Those are some things I think we can look at. So switching to water, then I think the water is a little more easier to see, I think, than the energy. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
Can you just repeat that one more time, just so I understand what you're.
Okay, so for instance, your first tier is the first is 1 kilowatt hour to 2,000. And it's at, it's down to, what's it, at 0.0878, I believe it is right now. And so, if that's at cost or not. So the first tier, I'd like to see closer to at cost, not the cost of wholesale, but cost of the expenses and everything included. And then you have possibly the second tier could be something still in more of the affordable range. The third tier starts adjusting to compensate if we have to do more for capital or anything like that. And then the 4th tier is a conservation tier. So if somebody's using an extreme amount of power, and the same thing as we'll get to with water, then that's where you would possibly look at. So those are the suggestions I'd just like to talk about, and just so we can sort of bat some ideas around and see what might be feasible. So that's one of the things I would think, that looking at the tiers and readjusting things a little bit might be advantageous to everybody. I've heard in several council or paper, different articles, what can we do for the lower income? And I think that's one thing that could be done, is looking at at least the first tiers of the water and of the different utilities. So what is needed for the household for a basic household? So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Do we, on the tiers, on any tier, do we have it broken down on what our base cost is, where the funds go to? What pays for CIP, what pays for O&M? Is it broken down that way?
No, and that's if we had more time, I would love to go into that.
I mean, that's the way, to me, the base rate's got to pay for O&M, at least.
Correct.
And for CIP, we gotta. I think that's the simplest way to approach it. Is what is in those various rates? Where does that money go to? I think we understand that would help us out tremendously.
So Raftillis did have that in their spreadsheets, but their spreadsheets, there was 55 different sheets within their overall spreadsheet.
Well, and it doesn't need to be that complicated, but I think we need to understand that part of it to understand these tiers, because, you know, when you say, you're gonna raise up questions you're doing with me, if you're saying somebody gets a cheaper rate because lower income or whatever, if we all gotta pay the base rate, what the heck's the difference, you know? We gotta come up with some solution that makes it fair and just if you're gonna use more power, sure, pay for it. And, you know, but if it's broken down in O&M, CIP, the various cost categories, I think it'd make more sense to give us a better opportunity to make a good decision on that.
Well, I believe the tiers, and maybe you could help, so first I'll make sure what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that a tier would be special for the lower income. I'm just saying I think it would be, the rates are supposed to be based on at cost. And we've just been throwing percentages at this rate for the last couple of rate changes. And so that's not at cost. It's just saying we're just gonna increase it by a certain percentage. And we decreased it by a certain percentage. We didn't really look at all the different scenarios, different aspects. So that's what I would like to do. Now that if you get the first tier that says this is what a household needs, then everybody benefits from it. And it's like, okay, then let's pay what at cost for what we have a normal use of, what's reasonable.
Defining the household, is it 2 people, 3 people, 5 people, 8 people?
Well,
where do you make those distinctions? I think you're right, I understand what you're after, but those are the things I think we have to understand before we're gonna make a recommendation. Or at least I wanna understand, because we have to have the CIP. I mean, we're getting out of a CIP mess right now. I mean, with all the things that we're trying to get caught up with, I think we've made some great strides on getting consultants in and doing all those things. And you use that money, otherwise it looks bad if we don't use that CIP money.
But this is a discussion I'd like to have.
Sure, I agree. No, and I agree with what you're bringing up. So.
And I think what Howard's saying, the way he's approaching it is the right way to do it. You gotta know what you're spending, what it costs. You know, per household is gonna be a really funny question, right? You know, without a doubt. But you gotta find out what your base cost is to start with. And then you can go from, maybe it's per house, maybe it's per occupancy. I don't know how it goes from. I don't know how you do that, but the point is you gotta know what you're spending to start with.
Well, and maybe I misstated myself, because it's not that I was trying to do that. I'm just, okay, for instance, let's look at, so I'm going to get off base really quick and say, because the water's a lot easier than power. The water, you're looking at 8,000 gallons of water for the first tier. Okay, so it would be, if that's what a normal household uses inside and hardly anything on vegetation, then that's a reasonable place to start. And so I'm not saying, okay, it's 2 people, it's 4 people. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to be reasonable. And I think that's where the electrical is the same way, it's 2,000. So I think the tiers were established for a conservation aspect. You know, you keep on using that, because I did some research, but I have to go back again I went back to 82 and tried to do the best I could to find all the different rates and the different things. And some of it were pretty basic, and some of it we started making changes. So I was trying to find out if I could get an understanding. And I'm pretty positive most of it was conservation. And if it's linked to the no growth, that makes a lot of sense too, okay? So, you know, and that's what I'm just saying. So when you get to, right now, you've got a distinction between commercial and residence. And commercial uses a lot more or has different things. We can understand those a little bit more, and we put a higher rate, another tier for the residential, and that's what the extreme is, in extreme conservation. And we put a lower rate in, maybe with a lower amount for the commercial, to say, okay, if you're not using that amount, then you're not going to be hit by this higher, because you're just saying it has to go from a certain thing. And I'll bring that up real quickly. For the water, it's easier to see that too. That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, I'm not trying to say we do one for the lower income. I'm just saying it would help them, because we're going to go to the at cost. I don't believe we're at cost now. We're above cost for the rate in most cases. And so that's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, and Howard's questions would let us know what at cost is. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So, yeah, because I've put a few spreadsheets, just taking numbers and start playing with things, because there's one way to do it, is just take the full amount. You take the 150,000 kilowatt hours, and you take the full amount of money, and you'd say, what's the minimum that anybody would have to pay? But that also includes the city, and the city's not paying the retail, the city's only paying the wholesale, which I agree with, and I think most of us have agreed with that. So that's another concept we have to consider. So we do have to compensate for the city's use of the extra power for the infrastructure, et cetera, and all that. So, but I don't think the residents should get hit with all that either. So, that's the thing, that the cost of service didn't necessarily do that, but they put the money in buckets that made it that the residents should pay more. And when I don't agree how the buckets were done. It was a utility-wide thing that could be done across the United States, but it didn't, in my opinion, didn't take into consideration Boulder City. And that's what I'm trying to get at. So again, history, trying to keep Boulder City's history and at cost. You know, we're one of a few in the, especially electrical, that is supposed to be at cost. The rest of them, they can make a profit. Boulder City shouldn't be. At the same time, we should be working as a city and not singling out the utility to say, oh, the utility is on city land, and so we're giving them a deal. We're all the same city, you know, so we're all part of the same aspect. The utility, shouldn't be us and them. It should be, we're all part of the same thing. The city is part of it. And as residents, it makes a lot more sense that way. Let's let everybody take advantage of it. So we shouldn't be charging rent for any utilities from the city. So, and that's what, when they were doing the franchise fees, that was sort of they were looking at some of that in that Reftil study. And I think we said that was a bad idea, but I saw one of the reports that brought up the franchise fee again that worried me. So those are things that, and I think the franchise fees, that's something that's associated with the rate that we want to be careful of.
You know, I'll throw out there a little bit, just to be what they call cost of service. The reason that the commercial customers usually get better rates is because they tend to have a higher load factor. In other words, they're running maybe 24 hours a day, and they're running at a load that's fairly consistent. But you're selling a lot of energy, so they're paying a price per kilowatt hour, which is maybe not too bad, but they're buying a lot of it. Where you have a residential customer that's typically going to come home from work and run a lot of energy during the peak hours of the day. And so you have to build a facility and build a system that can handle those peak loads, but they're not buying much energy overall. They're just buying energy in the afternoons when they need it, and it costs more money to serve them. And so that's typically the way the industry runs. And Boulder City is kind of a little bit different there, but we ought to still look at some of the same principles, you know, where those costs actually are, and address those customers that are driving those costs, and give some breaks to the people that are basically making it easier to serve and making the city money. So that's just something we want to take a look at when we do this.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because demand is a really big factor of that, and there are ways to save money and reduce costs on the residential side, you know, with smart meters, thermostats. You know, the largest load and demand that we've got in our part of the country in a household is a HVAC system. So, I mean, it's my understanding we've got a rebate program for if you do a new HVAC system. There's also other ways, like, you know, some of these smart meters that efficiently heat and cool your home during, you know, off-peak demands. Now, demand has drastically changed in the last 2 years because so many people are working from home now all the time. So the demand has also changed, but there's still efficient ways to kind of tap into that, and that may be something we can explore as a committee, to look at smart meters where, you know, you have it tied to the network, and it kind of efficiently runs, and if folks want to opt in, you know, and it'd be totally voluntary for ones that do, then they could, you know, kind of get a certain tier or rebate or whatnot, you know, and opt in on you know, you raise it a degree or so during these peak demands would be the summer months, right? Not everybody's going to want to do that, but to have that option available, you know, is a way to kind of keep rates down. So.
Yeah, these are the type of conversations I want to get at, and so we haven't been able to do it. Other agendas haven't really allowed it, and so it might take a meeting, and like I said, several, because we'll probably push some more ideas out. Everybody's presenting a lot of ideas, but now we have to figure out how do we get the facts to figure out that we can put these facts into, that we populate the spreadsheets that we do have and utilize some of the things. Okay, so I guess the other main issue on this one was the solar, and so we're still waiting for Silver State on that. Okay, so did anybody else have anything on the electrical?
Well, I'm not with all of this, but what I would comment on is that if you have a 1,700 square foot home, you're gonna, as I remember my bill, that I pay 2 different rates on my electric. For certain kilowatt hours, I pay one rate, and above that, I use something else. So it's not like we're talking about income, but if you have a 1,700 square foot house, you probably have a lower bill than if you got a 3,000 square foot home. And so that, I mean, they're tied together with how much money people make, but it's not like we're trying to say we're giving the low income people a break. It's just the amount of power that they use at different rates. Is that correct? Okay.
That's what I'm looking at, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Because basically, I think that's a good way to say it. So you're sort of a size of a house or something is one way to look at it, because it is, I think that sort of does the income. And it's just, we've talked, that's one thing we have talked about in this committee, is that we were trying to help the citizens. And like I said, I've seen different articles about, okay, lower income in Boulder City, and doesn't seem to be it. Well, this is, when you're talking at cost, and we know certain of the tiers aren't at cost, then that's what I'm trying to look at. So not really subsidizing it, just let's start there, and then the larger tier might have to compensate for some of the, making sure we get all that we need for capital in that. So, but I totally agree that we have to look at all the costs, and there are several ways to break it out, and it takes a lot of time to do it. So, thank you. Okay, so let's close out the electrical and go to the water, and then I'd just like to talk a little bit about the conservation of the water rate on that too. So we'll close out item number 5 and go to item number 6, discussion regarding water conservation goals, objectives, and rates. And so, did the city, just not, city have anything on that?
Nothing other than what we were talking about in the goals, how it is ongoing. We're looking at turf rebate programs for golf course, city facilities, updating irrigation plans, stuff of that nature. But there's nothing else to present on it right now.
Okay. So Joe, you're exactly right, because you also interact, since you were with the Bureau too, we know that the contract for the water it's a congressional mandate. So it's a contract. So when they've put additional contracts out, or having the entity sign it, the water finally got water and power to agree. For years, water says, I'm going to take whatever water I want, I don't care. And so the Bureau of Reclamation has finally worked with the entities, and they came up even with that drought, which one is that there is no legal binding that anybody had to sign anything. So we have to give kudos to the Bureau of Reclamation to doing a lot to get people to finally realize the electrical and water. And that's where, looking at the water, it's more right now, it's more of a conservation than the electrical is. And so hardly anybody wants to see any of the rates go down. And so I don't disagree with that, but again, I would like to see that's where it's important to say, okay, here's a tier that's affordable, and then we start saying, now we've got conservation measures. And what do? I saw one article, they were trying to say, well, there'd be a tax to try to compensate for other projects that would get it. One of the projects, my understanding is that it's been discussed, is that Nevada's trying to work with California to buy into their salinity projects, or actually salinity and/or effluent. I don't know the best way to say it, but they're,
Desalinization?
well, desalinization, but I believe they're also talking about taking, because desalinization can almost be, they're having as much problem with getting rid of the brine than the others. So right now, my understanding, what I've heard about is California is really trying to recycle every bit of their sewer, the water effluent. So Howard, if I say it wrong, help me here.
You're fine. I don't know their water conservation, or their recycle programs are really strict. I know that. Their quality of water is, you could drink that water.
Yeah.
And, they go through 3 barriers of treatment to produce it, so, but I don't know how extensive it is. Along the coast, it's more extensive, I would suspect, because there's better opportunities to get rid of the brine, because it goes to those things, but, I don't know as far as what were you saying though about salinity?
Well, salinity and like effluent. Effluent is, because I think they're actually trying to reclaim every bit of effluent water, and then before they even go to salinity, trying to reclaim from the sea. So, but I thought I've understood that Nevada's trying to work with California, so we would put money up. And so I think some people are trying
Well, I
to.
think the money we're putting up is to build desalinization plants.
Okay.
Yeah, that's I think what you're getting at.
Okay, that's
That
what
we would support them using their ocean water versus our lake water. Is what
Here's what happens right now. I was involved in it quite extensively. There's a wastewater treatment plant out in the San Fernando Valley that's called the Tillman Water Reclamation System. And by the time they're done, the water is potable. And that's pumped through a 60-inch purple pipe up to the Hanson spreading grounds. And that's where it goes back into the aquifer through the sand and gravel and gets filtered again. The sludge is pumped over the hill to Hyperion, where it's further treated, more water's wrung out of it, and that's pushed out far out into the ocean. In fact, they extended that pipe, I think, another 1.5 miles, 2 miles.
Yeah, so they're just dumping it back in the ocean.
But they're now into, not the bay, they're into the currents of the ocean dynamics. So in other words, they're out actually into the currents. They're not just dumping it in the bay and it's building up in a pile. So now they're into the flow of the ocean currents, and that's how they're getting it taken care of now. And then they're also taking and using all the gas coming off the domes, and they're using that to power one of the power plants. So that's over there at Scattergood. So it's pretty interesting how it all ties together. But yeah, that's what we've done out in the San Fernando Valley, and it's pretty impressive. You'd have loved it to see them pressure test the pipe, a 60-inch pipe that was 8 miles long. They had to fill with water and pressure test. Yeah. Without the effluent water, it was actually potable water. Pull the potable water back out through the rain for rent tanks, filter it, and then push it down into the storm drain channels.
But most of that water is doing, all it's really being used for is groundwater intrusion to keep the ocean water from getting into the well water.
No, this is in the San Fernando Valley. We're way above that elevation.
Well, Tillman, I thought Tillman in Plant 1 and Plant 2 in Orange County, I thought they were all using their water.
No, this is in the San Fernando Valley. This is strictly LA Water and Power.
All right.
But yeah, that's a very interesting project I was involved in.
Okay.
You know, speaking back to the desalinization, I would think that could be the same solution, that they could just pump that brine water maybe 10 miles out into the ocean.
No, that's the issue. That's the problem. You can't, the salinity is so high, it changes the environment.
Even 10
It
miles
changes
out.
the concentration of the salt in the ocean.
Where you can get it in the
So
currents.
you have to have these huge tanks to bleed it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just dump it out. So that's the issue. You're creating another environmental concern that the conservationists are thwarting. So, that's, again, it's not, you can't win. It's difficult to win. I mean, I disagree with that dumping of the sludge in the ocean. I mean, that's just a mess. And it saves a lot of money. It saves a hell of a lot of money, but but for people that have to treat their sludge and haul it to a landfill and get all the permitting and da 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 da. I mean, you've heard the stories about truckloads, train loads of sludge traveling all over the country. Nobody wants it, so
Yeah,
it's the same issues, you know? So it's a residual, so.
But I think what I'm trying to get at is that in Boulder City, we want, as I've said, so I think we've all are trying to say it, we believe there's conservation effort we need to, but I think we're also saying too, we really don't want to get rid of our parks and stuff just so Vegas can grow more houses. So there's a limitation. Ned has said it several times, and I totally agree with Ned, is we are making a major issue by our low growth. And by having our low growth, we said, hey, we're going to take care of our own resources, so let us use our resources. You've already used all your resources up. You're using it into ours, and you want us to reduce more. So Eileen has had some suggestions, Ned's some stuff, and that's one thing we're trying to figure out is, okay, how can we do it? So I think we want to have a reasonable at-cost rate, and that's where I'm talking the tiers again. I don't want to see that the water is high just for conservation's sake, but we need some of it. So again, a reasonable tier for people that need just to use it in their household, and then look at the tiers otherwise. Joe, you were...
Well, I just want to throw in there real quick. Remember, we make money off the sale of water too.
Correct.
So anything we reduce, we're losing money in Boulder City. And we have water that we're not using that Las Vegas takes from us and uses. So we need to remember that too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we're all, taken from the same aquifer, Lake Mead. And I mean, one of the goals I have is, and I hope the committee shares that, it's my understanding that we repurpose 60% of the reclaimed water, back out to resell it to these solar treatment, the solar plants and some of the rock quarry and stuff like that. I would love for us to get on board with the rest of SNWA and use all of it, and figure out how can we use, 100% and get that. And whether that, if it's with parks and the golf courses, if we're able to sustainably do that and still maintain, the quality that we expect. A lot of people come out, visit the golf courses. They're great. I'm a golfer, so I'm not going to, advocate for something that would over time, harm the courses. But like, how can we take that 40% that we're just dumping out into the desert basically and reuse it? Because we're in a federally declared shortage this year for the first time in the history that the dam has been filled. So it's really, and to kind of understand that, I mean, it's a really big deal.
Right.
I mean, we're not going to feel it as a state because of the efforts the SNWA has put in place, because the consumption has gone down as the growth has gone up. So we can't control the growth over the hill. So eventually the growth is it's gonna be where we're all gonna experience the cuts as a state. And so what can we do to prepare for that? And so that's, one of the things I'm thinking about is, as a committee, do you guys have ideas on how we can take, not waste that 40% of reclaimed water? So I'd love to, hear if you guys something you're chewing on, or because that could potentially lower the rates too. So
One thing I've wondered about along those lines is maybe we ought to have somebody or hire somebody that would go out and market that water that's flowing in the desert. Find somebody that would come into Boulder City with an industry that could use water at whatever quality and put it to work and sell it, make some money off of it. And that means we'd have a revenue stream, but the water would not be just going to waste down there. I mean, people are they can be going to Vegas, but they're gonna be buying water from the SNWA anyway, so they're gonna be buying water out of the lake. Here we have water that's being thrown away. We might as well try to put it to use, find somebody that would use it. I think it's might be worth it, maybe getting some kind of marketing deal, or talk to somebody that could maybe bring somebody in here that would want to use that water. There's got to be somebody in the desert that would like to use it.
I'd like to see I think what's been asked for tonight, but just to reiterate, what is our uses of, or how much water are we getting in? Get a track record of how much water we're buying or getting from SNWA, the raw and the potable, and then where we're distributing it to. Where is it? How much are we treating? How much is going out? How much is going to the being used at the solar plants or wherever else is being used? Just to get some sort of water balance so we know where that water's going. That would be a good start. Same thing with I agree, and I think the same thing with the power. I'd like to see what our sources how much we got coming in, how much is going out, get a balance in there. And undoubtedly, we're gonna come, I know what's gonna happen with the water side is we're gonna find out we can't account for the water coming in and how much going out aren't gonna match. And that's another issue we'll address later on, but yeah, I think we got some great ideas that are probably up here, sitting right here amongst us all, but we just need to know what the resources are and what the current distribution is so we can figure out how to redistribute that treated effluent.
I think the Raftillis spreadsheet, there's one of the sheets is called usage. And I think that has most of it. It's a lot of data, so trying to get it all. It's like I said, there's a lot of great data in the Raftillis spreadsheet. When you're looking at 55 sheets, different spreadsheets, it takes a lot to get through it.
I mean, and what we're gonna one of the issues we're gonna look at or deal with is, there's goals set by SNWA and others to what our gallon per capita per day water use should be. And we need to figure out, one of the things we're gonna address, I think, is how close are we gonna try to come to that number? Where are we at if we're at a level that we need that water for those purposes, like we're talking about parks and whatever, then that's what it is. But we need to define to other entities, they're gonna wanna know why we're higher or lower. George kept on claiming we were at 500 gallons per day per capita. But, I don't know that number, but I wanna see what we're at. And if we're within 10, 15, 20 gallons of
It's on your utility bill. It comes in every month. You have it to your own knowledge and everything. The problem George has, and everybody else, is the effluent water that's going out from the wastewater treatment plant is a commodity.
But,
The thing is it's being used, okay? And the problem is, if you reallocate it to parks, golf courses, and everything else, now when your dust control mitigation comes into effect on plants, solar or otherwise, you've got no water to sell to them.
That's right.
And now you're gonna go to the industrial water, your untreated water,
Right.
and you're gonna pay a whole bunch of more money because you don't have a system within Boulder City to distribute the raw water throughout the town. So right now, I know for a fact that when they were building the last solar farm, they ran out of effluent water, treated water. They had to go to raw water and tap that. Okay, so how much time do you take and do? Can you guarantee there's no more solar projects? There's no more construction down in the El Dorado Valley to where they're not gonna have to run polypropylene pipe all the way down the highway to give water to these other facilities? No, you can't do that. Because I know of 3 big projects getting ready to hit the books right now that are not responsible for Boulder City, but are in Boulder City limits. Okay, so if you gotta start selling them industrial water or what they call untreated water, that's a different cost than the wastewater treatment. The wastewater is the hardest working water we have in Boulder City. Okay, if you want, store it in a tank, store it in a pond. Okay, but don't sell it to everybody and commit to having it produced at that rate to where you have a company come in and demand to have it and use it, and then you can't supply it through water conservation. You're really shooting yourself in the foot.
So, if we're talking about water conservation, I think I agree with everything everybody's saying about trying to find better uses for effluent. But from my perspective, we're still digging the same hole. We're still using too much water per capita, period. So our focus really shouldn't be on where it's going out to. It's what we're doing with what's coming in. It's things like having instant-on hot water heaters underneath the sinks. So instead of somebody turning on the water, running 5 gallons to get hot water out of it, they're getting it immediately. Things like that the city can enforce. You mentioned turf. Make sure that's not just the golf courses, it's also, a refund for residentials or a swap out. You take out turf, you put in artificial turf, so they still got their green out in front. Something that somebody's gonna buy. But as long as we're looking at the back end, we're still using too much water. The lake is still gonna go down and we're contributing to that. And the only way to do that is stop what's coming in, stop us from using it. And we've gotta look at how to get people to reduce their consumption and to use the water that they're getting respectfully, I guess is the right way to put it.
I'd like to see. I mean, we can discuss all these points. I think it's good discussions, but really, we need some data on the water balance and the power balance, where that water, where it's coming in and how much is going out. How accountable is it? That's another issue, is how accountable are we for all those pieces of the water, you know? I don't, I'm just gonna guess we're probably have a really poor balance on figuring out how much water's coming in and how much is going out, so.
Again, in my opinion, we're in a complicated situation, because if we give up too much water, we may never get it back. Theoretically, the contract with SNWA is that we will get the water back if we needed it. But ownership is 9/10 of the law.
I don't agree, I disagree with it. I think if we got a certain amount of water we're allocated, that's our water. Whoever gave it away before was foolish. Bottom line, that's a history thing I don't know, I don't understand. I've heard other people spout it out, that we gave up things to get within SNWA. Whoever gave that away was crazy. But whatever we have to hold on to. I'm 100% behind that. That's our water. And that's our limit on growth too, right there. So.
Yeah, so that's what we're trying to figure out. So I think these are the conversations we want to have, and I guess we ought to make sure too what this committee can do, because we want to bring up the different ideas. So the best thing to do is to put as many ideas out there as we can, and that's the hard part when you're brainstorming, is you don't poo-poo anything.
Right, no, I agree.
You just put the ideas out there, then you come up and figure out, so let's get it out there. So that's what we gotta figure out. So now we have a rate aspect. We probably have a water conservation meeting too, that we wanna focus on some of that. But we have an obligation with the rates. Does the people, at least do you two agree that we have a place to what regular water conservation? Does this group have something we can say, okay, we're gonna talk in length about water conservation? Is that going outside of our goals?
No, I think it's fine to talk about, because one way to loop it back into the water use is we start having the residents conserve more water. That's part of our revenue right there. So that's another aspect of it. So that's the easiest way to tie it in, whether conservation's a part of your purview or not.
Okay, because so I think so again, if we bring out a lot of things that we have a lot of good ideas, we just got to figure out, because Ned's brought it up several times. I think a lot of people have brought up different aspects that we need to keep in mind, and then we just got to figure out what we can do and work with. Again, I think just like the golf course, to a certain extent, that allows us to keep a certain amount of water in Boulder City, because they're going to want it over the hill if we don't use it. It is similar to the way the 7.5 works. And that is, before, if somebody wasn't using their full allocation, the other entities could use it. And they got it back, and after a lot of struggle, people did start getting it back, but it took a little while. That's one of the reasons we're in the trouble we did, because we started in 1999 with trying to get everybody balanced, and then we had excess water, but in 2002, we had one of the lowest years on record. We had only 25% came into Lake Powell, and we still gave away excess water at that year. So that was one of the really big problems that put us into this on top of everything else. So we have to be careful with that type of concept. So we're all saying, I agree with what we're all saying. Now we just said, how do we combine that? How can we do this in a reasonable time frame? We're talking about another major conversation, another major meeting. And Joe, that's what I was sort of saying. Some of these meetings, a lot of times people say, okay, 2 hours is the maximum people can go. And I know I look around and people are getting along with meetings that I'm still going, and people are think they're trying to say, shut up, Larry, shut up, we're done. And I can appreciate that. But at times, when we only meet once a month, or we can even do, we've got to find a way to get the data out there. So, I'm trying to do this with everybody. I'm definitely not trying to be control of the situation. I want to hear everybody's conversation, so.
It would be nice if we could actually get, and it'd be easy to do, get the utility department to give us how many gallons of water are sold to residential customers, how many to commercial customers, how many to the city every month, and see what's there. and where it's going, what's going out to the desert, and, kind of do a balance and see just where we need to concentrate our efforts.
I mean, it's my understanding that we've got that, and I believe that I've seen it, at least on an annual basis, to go back, maybe it was the fiscal year report or what report I looked at, but, I mean, I'm sure we can get the historical data, at least from the last year, time frame to look at, okay, here's your word, kind of see a trend. Just kind of going to what we can do now, right, for rates, that in that aspect, that turf reduction, right now we can get a rebate, right, and that's for non-purpose turf. So if we do remove that turf, the SNWA will provide a rebate for that. There's going to be a period of time when that ends, and then it won't be a rebate, and it'll just be something that has to be done by the legislation. So it's something we could get on right away with whatever non-purpose turf the city has, and including the golf courses, and look at how can we get that in before we miss out on that rebate deadline.
Something we may want to, and that may be a slippery slope too with what the SNW is doing, where they're basically buying that turf. But they're also committing you, when you do that, they're committing you to never put grass back in that land again. And so we need to make sure that's going to be probably part of the deal, but make sure that doesn't somehow address our ultimate allocation of water as well. That they don't take a look at that, because I think we're allocated about, I don't remember, 17.5 million acre feet. No, million acre feet a year.
Million gallons per year.
And we use about 10 of that.
Right, and so we're already conserving.
Right, we're already conserving. I want to make sure that we don't lose any of that 17.5 million by signing away our rights by letting them buy our grass from us.
The other thing is why are we looking at turf removal money when we're doing it to save water? Okay, and then when we save water, we shoot ourselves in the foot because we've got no revenue. Okay, so that's the balancing act we have to do. I love the instant hot water heaters, because for people that have children in the family and teenagers, they don't have a limit as to how much hot water they got. The other problem is you have to look at, a lot of the residences in Boulder City are still all electric. When you put a 30 or 25 or 30 kW instant hot water heater in, you don't have enough electricity. So who's going to take care of that? And this vicious cycle goes on and on and on and on and on. The bottom line is we need to conserve, but we have to do it wisely. And that's the whole thing. Smart instant hot water heaters, if you have no electricity, will not work if the power's out. Now they're talking about removing natural gas in residential. The gas companies out here putting valves in all over Boulder City to shut and segment off the gas sections. That's what they're doing out here, because they can't do it. It was all just a pipe going all over the place. There's no sectionalizing areas that they can shut off the natural gas to work on anything. They have to shut the whole town down. So for people that know the history of Boulder City, the only place natural gas enters into Boulder City is at the old Arco station, which is now 7-Eleven. That's the main steel gas pipeline for all of Boulder City, coming right down the parkway. So if you want to have some fun, they just shut it off and there's no natural gas anywhere in Boulder City. That's it, you're done. Now all of a sudden all your utilities have to be all electric. There isn't a single house in Boulder City that is under 150 amps consumption on a 1,300 or 1,400 square foot house today because of the need of circuit breakers in the house. So who's going to subsidize that money? Boulder City? No, I don't think so. So you got to be really careful of what we're trying to do here as this committee, and that's why I recommend strongly that we need a couple workshops to where we can talk about this, bring the paperwork forward, and figure out exactly what we can do without being constrained by the rules that we've gotten banged on several times before because we're out of our lane of discussion.
No, I agree. So like, again, if the city can help us out with legal and tell us which is the best way to have a meeting, how to preface the meeting would be very helpful. But I think too that I want to add, if I understood, so then I think that's the reason I was asking about the 25 million or what the SNWA wanted to do with the treatment plant, is if there's too many rules from them to say you have to do it this way. My understanding, I think most people are saying the same thing here, is we don't have enough water for both. We don't have enough effluent to help with, to sell and to use on the parks or even a golf course. I'm not even sure we have enough to do on the golf course. That's one thing I guess I haven't heard properly, is how much effluent we have. Is it enough for one golf course? Is it enough for?
I mean, you'd have to have somebody just do the numbers on how much they
The old
need.
mini course, it's on record, was 1 million gallons a day. Summertime watering and the mini golf course was 1 million gallons a day.
If I remember right, there was 1 million gallons a day that was flowing into the desert from the sewer ponds too. So roughly anyway.
That's before we were doing dust control. Now we had zero because of dust control, and we had to get industrial or non-treated water over there to supplement their usage of water for dust control. And that's why that last solar farm got fined $120,000 for dust mitigation violations. And they said, well, that's nothing. One day being late is $150,000. We'll pay the fine.
Right now, our average is about between 1 and 1.3 million gallons. On average, we send about 600,000 to the solar fields and then the quarry, 187. So there's between 4 and 700,000 going out into the desert.
So we definitely want to use that. It's just a matter of if we build a Thomas Mahal treatment plant, and so we put 25 million, and we have to add extra staff and all this. That's what I think I heard Howard saying. We're not. Are we really gonna? Do we have enough water to justify that? So that's the reason we're saying, please, can we look at it before it gets finalized?
And what that comes down to, we produce Class C water. It's all classified, B, C, D, and so forth. And our water is Class C water. To go to Class B would be quite an effort to do as far as equipment wise. And, our limits are pretty good for the facility we have. It's great. And if you say we're making what, 1.3 million?
I think 1.3 is about the max.
Which is about, that matches numbers for 15,000 people, that's what you should be getting. So you can't get much more out of 15,000 people.
And that's the difference between, and that's what Eileen brought up several times, is that's the difference between what SNWA is saying, that theirs is $100 per 100 gallons per person compared to our 500, because they're including what is being recycled. We don't, Boulder City can't recycle
And that's what
it.
we got to see those numbers. I want to see that breakdown, so we know we're all good with that.
Yeah, that one, I don't know if.
I agree, we got to know those numbers.
Yeah,
That's what
if
I'm asking
Raftillus.
for.
But just so you guys, so like I said, if you look at the Raftillus spreadsheet, I would start there, because the city might have it collected, if not, Raftillus did. And I give credit to what they did do and stuff, and like I said, it's just hard to follow, but there is, it's called usage. You'll find a section for electrical, water, and all that, and there's a usage for water also.
So a water balance is that's all from the water side we just have to get.
Right,
How much is coming in, how much is going out, how much is lost, and do we absorb that, or is there some other way to account?
Yeah, that one I'm not sure they have, but they had it broken down per customer and stuff like that.
That's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and we can go from there. So
Yeah.
I would suspect on the electrical side, we could do the same sort of thing. I'm not that familiar with, but I'm sure measuring wise, it's still got to be very similar. So.
And that's some of the statistics I would like to see if we can even get per quarter or something, because I think that would be handy. If we just do a general amount of usage, that would be, I think, helpful for us to understand what we're doing.
Actually, we could get 3 years worth of data and show us what the usages are seasonally. I think that would give us enough information to be on firm ground.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 years of data should be available, I would suspect, easily enough.
When is the last time the city did like a meter survey or meter loop survey to find out? I want to use an example. We had a leak at one of our plants. We have no idea how long the leak was, but we didn't meter that section very well. So it leaked probably 5 million gallons in a week. The point is, we didn't know it until we got a bill, and it was outlandish, obviously. So are there meters installed in enough different places that we can see if we have a leak someplace or a bunch of little leaks?
I would say no.
Might be something to consider.
Yep.
That would be something under ARPA probably, right? Okay, so that would be actually, that's a very good, and that's the thing I guess we've got to be careful. I mean, that's the thing that I like that, and I'm bringing it up, the reason I want to harp on getting as much information out today is there are some things we have time to do and some things we don't, because if we have a certain amount of money, we have a certain amount of time, we need to get certain ideas out there as fast as we can to make sure that that if it could be included or if it's something worthwhile. So, those are things too. So what I'm looking at also in the water charge really quick to say is right now we have 4 categories in the residential, 8,000 to 60,000. And we have 4 in the, commercial. We start at 60,000 and go up to 550,000 and above. So those are 4 different tiers, and that's what I think we want to maybe look at, because you might want to add a smaller one in the commercial to give the people that aren't using hardly any water a break. I think Greg had mentioned in the past, somebody just using a sink in a bathroom. They're not necessarily using anywhere near that water. So, but their rate's not really higher. It's the same as the residential rate. It's just they're starting at a higher amount, and that's one thing we want. Does that make sense? Because it's a 279, which is the same at our 25,000, the residential rate at 60. So it's equal to the residential rate, but you're starting at a higher amount because you're saying we're assuming you're going to use 60,000 plus, so we're going to charge you the 60,000 rate.
Point of clarification, what it is it's the gallon, the bare minimum gallon does not start at 0 on industrial commercial accounts. It starts at a bare bottom of certain amount. And there's a couple of businesses in town here that have multiple bays or stalls, but there's only one bathroom or a certain amount of maintenance and working stalls, but they're charged the minimum every month of X number of gallons of water. But they never reached that point. So that's what the problem was.
Yeah, so in the water, and as far as the rates go, I think this committee has at least 3 things we've talked about. First off, the service charge, I'd like to understand the service charge better. And I don't think I'd like to understand the definition that is written on the back of the utility bill. It talks about the service charge being used for infrastructure, pretty much says the service charge covers all of our water costs, the way I read it. And I don't believe that's the case. So that would be, if we can get the clarification on that, if it's right, then I need to understand it. If it's wrong, then let's correct it and put the proper definition on the back of the utility rate. So that would be, I think that's one thing. So, but we do need to, again, the service rate was increased percentage-wise, not really at cost. It was just, we're gonna jack it up. And the residential rate went up about 104%. The commercial rate went up 84%. So that's a big amount in 3 years, 3 different aspects. So when I'm talking about, so look at the tiers, look at the steel, and then if the city could please explain, in the resolution you have the service charge, residential B, and then you have a calculation adjustment. So you have 1 charges the water charge, 2 is the service charge, and 3 says the calculation. And it talks about the adjustment, and it says the total water charge is calculated on the average monthly usage plus the service charge multiplied by the total residential units. So the way I read it is that each person's going to be charged for the meter. There's only 1 meter, but if you got 4 people, each person is paying $25. If you had 4, and that's because you're multiplying it by each resident. And so we've asked the question over a year ago, and we haven't got an answer yet. Why it's done that way, and we asked for an example. So I guess I'd like to see, can we get an example? So maybe I'm misunderstanding the calculation, but if we could get an example and explain why it's being done the way it is.
Okay, so the two requests I've got, the definition on the back of the bill to get that information to you if it's being provided as that definition, or to get that corrected, and then an example of multiple unit meters or?
Yeah, so if you look at the resolution, and I don't have we're on revision, can't remember what number it is, but if you look at the latest water rate revision
Those are for
resolution,
Duplexes and apartments?
it's residential Schedule B.
Okay, Schedule B.
Is that for like apartments though?
It's the bill, let's see, the bill shall be applicable to residential users, family dwellings, which is
Duplexes and
strange.
apartments, yeah,
Yeah,
duplexes and apartments.
but not motels, because that's under commercial. But if you look at the resolution, it's residential Schedule B, and then the calculation is number 3. Because when we asked for the resolution to be modified, we asked about that, and we've not seen any work been done on it since we asked, which was last May.
We'll find an example and get that information.
Here's what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
If you have a residential, commercial, or a apartment or whatever lot, there's a zoning on it. It's an R1-1, R1-4, whatever it is. But the basic premise of the service charge for the water meter is 1 meter, 1 service charge. These units we're talking about, the tenants are being billed $25 a month, along with the property owner of the unit being billed $25 a month. So it's unjust enrichment to the city of Boulder City because you're paying for 5 service charges for 1 meter.
And you know, it's a little bit unfair too, because those four residents in say it's a fourplex, they're rapidly getting up into the upper tiers of that rate. So they're paying a meter charge plus a high rate. Whereas if they were a single, they would pay the meter charge, but they would probably stay in the low rate. So it's a disparity that probably ought to be addressed, I would think.
So, but I think, and then back to the conservation is like I said, I think the easy way to look at the tiers and to say, try to keep it into a at-cost aspect is try to find a tier or two that is at cost and then start raising it from there. What is reasonable that we'd really want to do like a conservation cost, or, you know, you see right now the highest rate we have for residential is $3.73, and then for the commercial is $3.83 is the highest. So that might be jacked up too. You might have if it seems like you're exuberant amount of water, then that jacks up to $5. You know, you might just throwing a number out there, but that might, and then you would compensate for if you lowered. But again, we're just talking at cost. We're not saying subsidized. We're talking at cost, which $2.39 is, I'm pretty positive, is not at cost. It's higher than what it costs for all the expenses and even the capital for water. The water available cash for water just keeps going up. So I know we are over collecting for water. Well, we are collecting more, but maybe the over collecting is a little rough to say, but we've got a reasonable amount. Go ahead, Carol.
I just want to point out that we have debt that we pay interest on. So when you're talking about that, we kind of need to maybe put that in the equation.
And it is. So we're still paying for the debt, and we still have extra money. And we're talking about the $600,000, which Raftil had suggested. And the thing is that debt is raw water.
But you want
So
to
again, the first tier shouldn't be charged for raw water because the first tier doesn't use anything close, doesn't use the water
But we
charge.
do want to calculate in before the fact that there's debt and you're paying interest on it out there. So it's kind of, I haven't heard that brought into that equation. And I think it needs to be
Sure, okay,
kind of brought in there.
that would be great to that, because it's on that line is, do you happen to know, Carol, can that be paid? So as of my understanding, there was a limitation that what could be done with that until June of 2022. Once that time comes, can we pay the interest off at the first part of the year?
That's a finance question,
Okay,
but
I
I
didn't-
know that the limitation was over in '22.
Okay, because that's one thing, so that's the same type thing. So all this stuff, I totally agree, and as we get into it, these are the questions that we want to find out.
Yeah.
And these are revenue requirements that we want to find out, that if we can pay the interest up front, then we're paying less amount, which reduces our revenue, which reduces our rates. So
Right.
these are things that I'm just
But
trying to
it just needs to
understand.
be in that equation so that that it's out there.
Right, but again, that's raw water is the only debt we have.
Mm-hmm.
And your first tier of water users doesn't use any raw water. So
Right, but
that
that's
debt
still
isn't
all in
necess-
that water, it's all in that, in the water equation.
It can and it can't. It doesn't, it's
Yeah.
one
No,
thing to
So
be
I'm
looked
just
at.
saying, I'm just
Yeah.
suggesting that it needs to be like addressed.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
but that bond that we've got that's outstanding is separate of the water service charge on the bill.
The water service charge, definitely, and then.
So we've already got
and then-
that figured in there. We're not messing with that. We're just looking at the water service charge and the way we're calculating our water service charge on certain meters that got passed over by the Raftillis report. And there was an individual that came up to me that was living in a fourplex as a tenant. He was paying the landlord the water that he was using, but then he was getting a service charge for water on his electric bill. So each unit had its own electric meter, but on a single line item was the water service charge. So he started talking to his neighbors. They all got charged the water service charge. Then he talked to the owner, and the owner was gotten charged for the water service charge and the water usage. So that's unjust enrichment. And that's what I'm trying to say. You as a city, we as a city, and we as a committee cannot see that as being justified. When you're getting 5 water service charges on one piece of property and there's only one meter sitting on the property.
But thank you, Carol, because I think I started poo-pooing you, which I said we don't do. So I think what we want to do is just get the ideas out there and then see how everything mixes together. And so that's where it might be, whether we split the meeting up or we say we have to have 2. Here's a bunch of the ideas, and then here's how can we start implementing them, though. But it's what is the obligation of the utilities and what is the obligation of the different aspects of the utilities? Just why, that's the reason I brought up the non-electrical. I'm trying to understand that non-electrical cost and how is it really a function of the electric or is it a function of the general fund? That's where we're trying to figure out, it's a revenue requirement, it's a rate issue, that's an extra amount that might or might not need to be there that would help to reduce a rate possibility. So that's the reason I keep harping on it, and that's what I'm trying to do. But everybody, we've got good ideas, and so we've got 2 things here. We have the conservation issue, we have the rate, we have to consider where our revenue is coming from. So I think the water is a lot more trickier than the electric. And so we have an overall rate aspect and conservation for electrical and water. And as Greg brought up, if somebody does get crazy and they do pass where there's no gas, because I guess that was in the last legislation, it didn't get passed if I understand correctly, that they were trying to do something with Southern Nevada water, the Southwest Gas. They were trying to shut them down if I understand correctly. Then Boulder City has started to get more on gas, and that's the thing would also lead to, so I'm a little bit off base here, but we need to look at our electrical infrastructure to make sure we can cover that if something would get crazy in the future. So that's something we also have to make sure that's part of the substation designs and stuff too, is if we did go all electric, are we covering that? And so I'm bringing it up because we have brought that up in the past. Anything else on the water aspect? Conservation, see, what do we have? We had conservation and rates. Objectives, I guess, would just be, we're still trying to figure out how we can help. Anybody else have anything? Okay. So I think, okay, so we will close, and I guess my next comment will be related to 7. So we'll close, so there's no more comments, we'll close item number 6 and go to item number 7 for possible action, discussion, and questions regarding potential agenda items for upcoming utility advisory committee meetings. We've talked about keeping this basic format, if I understand correctly. So we would have 1 through 7, and then add some of the additional ones. Now, the major thing with 1 through 7, though, is realizing we're not asking for the city to have something to present at all 7. It's just that we can just continue to discuss it, and we can go parallel with other, instead of saying we're just gonna do budget and we're gonna have to drop rates. And so, let's work in parallel. So does the committee or the city, either one, see a major problem with continuing with this, pretty much this agenda, and then adding 1 or 2 items to it, like the presentation and stuff like that, if it comes up?
I think the presentation can fall under the IRP. The only other one I would suggest adding is the O&M budget.
And I guess if we do that for February, then you'd probably want that as number 2 or number 3, then that staff could we would get that out of the way sooner than later.
If we're gonna have an extended conversation on the ongoing CIP, I'd like to have that up front. If Joe wants both the water and electric supervisors here just so they can leave, because they're pretty much working on overtime when they're coming in. But then the O&M right after that.
I don't think the committee, so make sure I'm not wrong, I don't think the committee has a we don't care which the order is, do we? So if you want to establish the agenda in the order that works best for the city, I try to be as polite as I can and give you the option at each time, but if you want to create the agenda to work for the city, I have no problem with that. And I believe that the committee is the same way. So that's, because right now, hopefully we'll be done before 5:30. This will be one of our shortest meetings. And we had the 7 agenda items, or the 8 with the public comment. And so that's why I guess I just want to, there will be some that we won't get lucky and be done as early. But if we keep these on there and try to keep focused, I would prefer to go this route, but if anybody has any major concerns, then I'd like to hear it. Or voice it, or whatever, whatever. So I'm not hearing anything major from anything from the committee.
I'm good.
Okay, so then, for next time, then I guess we will just add just what you said, so if you just add the O&M budget. But in the future then, so sort of reiterate, the city will look into when a possible, is there availability, Holly, that it's easy for February or March for a second meeting that the utility could fit into, do you know, or you guys just have you look at it?
We would have to look at it.
Okay. And I guess, if we, as we've done in the past, if you could email everybody and just say preference for February or March.
Yep, yeah, I'd also like to coordinate with finance to see if we can get the dollar figures from them pertaining to the rates. I don't know what their time frame is, because as we all know, they're working on the O&M right now. But I'd like to try to get a rough timeline from them, and then we'll present you guys with options of times that are available.
Okay, so make sure I stated it right. I think I stated it last time, and just make sure. So I think the intent of the committee is to only have a few. Maybe we have 1 to 3. I think 1 to 2 was suggested, maybe possibly 3. But items that we're asking the city to do research on or bring forward, and the rest of it is just our conversation. So that I just want to make it clear, and then again, let us know if we've asked for something that's not within a doable time frame. Please let us know. We're trying to be reasonable with it. Go ahead, Greg.
I'd like to have one at the next meeting, which would show the completion of contract percentage for Par Electric on the 69 kV loop. They have a lot of equipment down there behind the fire station. I don't think they're doing anything in the sense of containing any oil leaks out of the trucks and hydraulics. And I don't know if anybody in the city is watching that to make certain that we don't wind up having to clean up a mess when they pull out of there. There's a lot of equipment scattered all over the place. And the other thing, which I don't know if it's in our purview, but there's probably 300 cubic yards of dirt out there that the landfill would probably love. And because we are not the runner of the landfill, but it might want to make it behoove them to take it over there and use it for top cover.
A lot of the material that was transported to that area behind the fire station, it was transported up there for possible future use for the city, but if we're not going to use it, that's a great idea for it.
Well, it would benefit both of us, because that way the city does not have to maintain its dust control problems, and it can be utilized in another part. And they're gonna have to clean it up eventually. And the other thing is, I am not impressed, as a sidebar, I'm not impressed with the progress they're making down on Adams Boulevard. And we don't have anybody, I don't think, watching the hen house. Because the contract that was given to me in the agenda items a couple months back says they're supposed to be working 5 days a week, 10 hours a day. And they haven't hit that milestone yet.
I'd have to confirm with Marvis, but my understanding was every other Friday is when they're working. But their other days are 4/10s, and then the off week would be 5/10s. I can confirm with Marvis.
Yeah, I don't think Marvis, with everything he's got, needs to be babysitting them. But I'm telling you right now, as a resident of Boulder City, not sitting on this committee, they are not there even 4/10s. Okay, and we've got a contract with them that states they're gonna be on site this amount of days, this amount of time. It's not happening. One thing is a safety item, which is a side note. They had their line truck, their tugger truck down at the Boulder City tap, ungrounded, with the line going up into the shivs, going down the poles, with it raining, and guess what? It's not grounded, and there's kids climbing on it. The kids are down there playing on the weekends with their adults running in the ATVs and stuff. They're not taking care of it, and it's pretty slipshod, that if somebody gets hurt because that rope gets wet, starts to conduct, and somebody gets injured on that line, that tugger truck, that pingo we used to call them, it's gonna be a lot of problems.
I appreciate letting us know. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess for future, I think does anybody else have anything for the future or near future that we want to go over? Okay, then we will close that out and go to the comment period. This comment period is to allow for any comments made on any of the subjects. So if we open up the comment, again, the number is 702-589-9629.
You can speak your public comment.
Hi, my name is George Ree. So since my name was mentioned, I thought I'd take the liberty of saying something. There was discussed on the water issue if we could know how much water we actually use in a year. So for the 12-month period for fiscal year 21, well, let's start with fiscal year 20. We used 10,003 acre-feet of water in Boulder City. That's from the CAFR, so Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. That's online if people want to see it. That's for fiscal year 20. For fiscal year how much water we had. Oh, sorry, I was hearing the delay. That's why I stopped talking. Okay, so for fiscal year 2020, it was 10,003 acre-feet. For fiscal year 21, it was 10,920 acre-feet.
Hey, George,
so our water usage...
George, can you please turn off your
Yes.
live stream? Turn off the audio on your live stream, please.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Now it's off. Is that better? Okay, I apologize. So let me start again. It's just basically for fiscal year 20, it was 10,003 acre feet. For fiscal year 21, it was 10,920 acre feet. So our water usage increased by 9%. So people are talking about reductions in water usage, but that's not what's happening. We're actually using more every year. And I think that's going to be a problem given the drought that we're in. Now, if we talk about building this $25 million recycling plant, which is supposed to recycle, Mr. Littrell said informally to me, 1 million gallons a day, that would be about, 300 to 400 million gallons a year. All that would do would be to reduce the usage from FY21 back to FY20. So it's not going to reduce our water usage, it just stops the increase. But the problem with the Colorado River, as I've mentioned many times, is that what happened, well, I didn't mention this, what happened in the last water year ending in this last October is 7 million acre feet came down from the Rocky Mountains, of which 3.5 was used by the upper basin, leaving about 3.5 plus another 500,000, about 4 million acre feet to enter Lake Mead. But the usage of the lower basin is more like 10 million acre feet. So, just reducing our usage by 10% to compensate for a 10% increase means we essentially go nowhere. But really, the situation is so dramatic that I think we need to everyone needs to cut their usage by 50% across the board, because I don't think we have time in the whole basin to negotiate for years. People are talking about 5 years, with the rate study. You're out of time. Now, there's a good snowpack right now in the Rockies, as people probably know. But December is early days yet. So we don't know how much of that snowpack is going to evaporate. The next 3 months are going to be critical. That might buy you another year. But the writing's on the wall that the cuts, I think, that are needed are much more dramatic than what is being discussed in these meetings. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. But my main point was just to give you the numbers that are in the CAFR. Then for people who wanted the breakdown, as you hinted at, are in the Raftelis rate study. We're in their table 6. I'm not going to read out the numbers to you. You can look them up. You all know where that rate study is. But they give the breakdown for residential, single family, multifamily, and so on. The residential is about 30% of the water usage, so about 1 billion gallons a year. So the real problems are with the golf courses, of course. One thing I noted with the data from Raftelis, which were presented in December of 2020, halfway through fiscal year 21, is they forecast 2.9 billion gallons of water usage. And the actual water usage was, as I mentioned, 3.2 billion gallons. So they were off by 20%. They couldn't even forecast 6 months away what the water usage would be. So I think their numbers are really subject to question moving forward because they go up to FY25. Anyway, those were my comments. You can ignore the climate change stuff, but I really wanted to just mention to you that the data is available. We know what the numbers are. And the last comment was we actually use 610 gallons per day per resident, which simply got at by dividing, 3.2 billion by 365 days and 16,000 residents. You can, of course, do the math the way you want, and you can say, well, the golf courses don't count, the commercial doesn't count. Then you get at about 200 gallons a day, which is about double what SNWA's target is. Anyway, I hope this is helpful, and thanks for taking my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Okay, we'll just give a few, about another minute, just in case anybody else wants to call in. Again, the number is 702-589-9629. Okay, not hearing any other comments, then we'll close the comment period and make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a second? Vote on adjournment. Everybody agree and say aye.
Aye.
Anybody say nay? It passes unanimously, so it's closed meeting at 5:29. Thank you, everybody, for your time and patience.